Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel, and if you are returning, thank you as always for your love and support. I think these might be a little bit familiar because they are the best 22 projects from all of 2022. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number one. All right, I have a little bicycle wreath form, I'm going to call it for lack of a better term. I picked this up at Dollar Tree. I also have that sisal twine that I'd gotten at the Home Depot quite some time ago. And I am going to be taking my twine and wrapping this entire bicycle wheel, the spokes and everything individually. And I was actually inspired, and I was looking for my inspiration picture and couldn't figure out where it might be. And I realized just before doing this voiceover that it was actually my sweet subscriber Rose who shared her project last week that inspired me to create this. So thank you for the inspiration, Rose. But as you can see, I am just taking my twine and wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. Y'all, this took a really long time. I mean, longer than I had expected it to take. It probably took me a couple of hours to get this whole thing wrapped, so not putting you through all of that. But as you can see, I've got a bunch of loose ends at the top. Not to worry. Once I had it all wrapped, I'm just going to go around one more time on the outer rim, and I'm going to wrap in all of those loose ends so they will all be completely hidden. And once I get to the end, I'll just go ahead and I'll tie it off with that last loose end. I'll be able to trim it really close and just hit it with some hot glue to make sure that it doesn't come undone. And then I went ahead and I worked on the center to cover that up. I'm just going in between the spokes and wrapping it around and around until everything there was covered as well and no loose ends. Hitting that with some hot glue, and then I'll be able to trim that close and we will be all done with that. Now I'm using my little lighter to burn off all of those little strings, and it actually gave it kind of a cool aged look and effect too, because I really hit it hard with the flame. If you do that, just be careful, right? Make sure you have water nearby. But this is a bouquet, if you want to say, that I picked up from Walmart not too long ago, and I splurged a little bit on it. I think it was like $7 and change, if I'm not mistaken, which is more than what I normally spend, but I thought it was so pretty and it was going to be perfect for this. So of course I'm cutting it all apart the way I normally do. And once I had all of my pieces pulled apart, I went ahead and started fashioning it together the way that I wanted it to look. I was pairing up the buds, the blooms, with some of the greenery because I wanted to have that breaking it up a little bit. And then I went ahead and got out a piece of parchment paper to stick under here. I started pulling away the all of the blooms. I wanted to maintain my two anchor pieces, so the little hydrangea at the top and the bottom. I wanted to make sure that I kept those in the same spots so that I had the same area to fill in between. Hopefully that makes sense the way I'm trying to explain. I just wanted to make sure I didn't have big gaps with all of my florals. So here I'm realizing, you know, I need to put that parchment paper down underneath here. And the reason I use the parchment paper is that the hot glue doesn't stick to it. It peels right up off of the hot glue. So it's great to have under anything you're working with hot glue on, because you can just lift it right up off of there and you don't end up with, you know, pieces of paper stuck to the back of your project. So then I'm just going to come in and secure each of the other pieces, working top and bottom simultaneously. So coming in one piece at the top, one at the bottom. Now I'm going to go ahead and at first I thought I was going to attach the greenery to my bicycle wheel and then attach the flower in. And then I decided, you know, it would really make a lot more sense or make it easier for me to attach the greenery directly to the blooms and then attach that whole thing to the little wheel. So that was what I ended up doing. So I went ahead and got all of my greenery attached to my blooms. When that was all good to go, I proceeded to secure them to the little bicycle wheel. So Actually, I did decide I was going to go in and just make sure I knew where I wanted everything again now that I had started securing the top and bottom pieces down. And once I was satisfied with that, I went ahead and added the hot glue in. So just one piece at a time, taking my time. And once I had all of that secure, oh, I've still got a little bit more to do. And you know, I just do this so that it looks pretty to my eye, right? But once I had it all secure, I flipped it over, made sure everything was nice and attached. I added a little more hot glue where I thought it might need some. And then I was looking at it, and that little piece down the bottom, it was just sticking out funny, and I wanted it to continue to curve around. So I put a teeny tiny drop of glue there for that. Now, I thought I wanted to use this really pretty satin ribbon for the hanger, and I was going to put a bow at the top and all of that. So I got it on there, and I did not like it. It's a very pretty color and a very pretty bow, but I did not feel like it went with this piece. The piece is a little bit too rustic, and I felt like the bow was just, it was too satin. So I took it off, and I'm just using a simple piece of sisal twine, tying a knot in it. I did find that I ended up needing to off-center it so that my wheel would hang the way that I wanted it to hang, but you'll just want to play with that. It's going to depend on how much weight you have on your wheel, but let me know what you think. I love this. DIY number 2. For this project, I have these two, I'm going to call them rattan wreath forms from the Dollar Tree, and I've got a smaller version and a larger version. I'm going to be connecting them together, and to use that, you could use wire, but I have this, it's kind of the paper wrapped wire that I got off of Amazon. I do have it linked in my Amazon store. If that's of interest to you, you can find that in my description box, a link to my Amazon store. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around. I'm also going to tuck the wire through some of the wreath form itself, just to try to provide a little bit more stability. And you'll see here, I'm just gonna kind of try and tuck it through the actual wreath itself, not just around it. So kind of poking it in between the, again, I don't know if this is considered to be rattan or if there's some other term that's to be used for this, but I'm kind of putting it in between the strands of whatever this material would be considered. So once I have that all set, I'm going to take some of my burlap ribbon that I got from Costco. This is my Kirkland's ribbon that I'm always talking about, and I'm going to tie a length of it around the neck here. I'm just going to make a knot. This is going to be a very simple way of creating a bow. These are going to be my little tails for my bow in a moment. And then I'll take another length of the ribbon, and I'll create my bow part. So I'm just going to unravel this a bit, and I'm going to measure off a little bit of ribbon. I think if I had to guess, because you all know I tend not to measure things all the time, but I would say there are probably about 3-inch loops. So on either side of the center, I've got a loop that's about 3, maybe 4 inches. I did not want this to be too large, so I also did it until I had 5 loops on either side. I just wrapped it around and around, and now I'm going to notch the middle. So fold it in half a little bit to find the center, and then just put a little teeny tiny notch on either side to grab some more of my little wrapped wire trim. Not trim, but that's what I'm using to connect the bow. So you could also use a chenille stem. I just decided to use this because I was already using it to secure the wreath forms together. And I'm going to fluff out all of my loops. I'm just alternating back and forth from left to right. And once I have that all fluffed up, I'll go ahead and use the ends of the the paper wrapped wire to go ahead and secure that on top of the knot that I created. And I did want this a little bit off center, so you'll see that it's kind of off to one side. You could certainly center this if you'd like. You can put it on the other side if you'd like. I've got mine kind of off to the right side of my little wreath forms here. Once I have it in place, I'm going to dovetail the ends, just folding that in half and cutting the ribbon at an angle. And you want the shorter part of the angle on the folded edge. So once that's done, I'm going to take a piece of burlap, and I folded it a little bit so that I could double up what I was doing. So I folded it here. I'm going to fold it actually again because I'm trying to preserve as much of my burlap as I can. And I also want to make sure that I've got the same shape and that it's kind of symmetrical. So I'm going to go ahead and cut here. I'm folding it over a little bit more because I was like, I don't need it to be quite that wide when I cut it. But going ahead and cutting an ear shape. So making our little bunny ears here. Once I have those, I'm going to take my wire, my paper wrapped wire again. I don't know if there's a technical name for that, but I thought at first I was going to weave it through the burlap and then decided that that was just going to end up unraveling it and it wasn't going to be what I wanted it. So I set a piece of my parchment paper down underneath, and I am going to get my glue gun here and just put out a strand of glue, yeah, whatever, a bead of glue. And then I'm going to secure down my wire. And notice I did get my little finger protector. Be real careful when you're working with the hot glue. I have been known to burn myself pretty badly. So in this particular instance, I decided I really needed to be using the finger protector because I'm pretty much putting my finger right down on where the glue is as I try to get this all situated. So just be careful when you do that. So getting this all along the outer edge, I did not put it along the bottom, just along the two sides. And then I'll go ahead with my wire cutters and snip that off. And then I will do the same thing with the other one. But you can see here, I'm going to be able to gather up that little base to create that ear shape. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing with the other. And then I am going to kind of gather the bottom as I started to show you before. And I'm using a little bit of hot glue just to keep it in place and get the shape of the ear that I want. Doing that with both, kind of flattening them out a little bit. Going to use some more hot glue here. And then I'm going to secure the top, so the smaller of the two wreath forms. This is our little bunny's head. Just going to secure that on there. And then I've got these really pretty peonies that I've had in my stash for quite some time. I had gotten these off of Amazon actually several years ago. I had gotten several different bouquets of them, and this is the last one that I have. But I just thought that they were really pretty, and I like the color scheme with the burlap. So I had pulled apart my pick, true to form, right? And I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put these. At first I thought I was going to do a little fluffy tail with some Dollar Tree microfiber cloth. I have that kind of off, I guess it's a dust cloth actually, or a mop dust head thing. But I decided I was just going to use the flowers instead, and that could serve as a little, not so much a fluffy tail, but it's going to be representative of the tail, right? Because it's obviously not a tail, it's three little flowers down at the base. But once I had everything where I wanted it, I'm securing it all with some generous amounts of hot glue. And just be aware that if your hot glue setting is on high, you might melt some of those little stems. So just be aware, you might need to help it a little. But let me know what you think of this. I am in love with it. DIY number 3. All right, it's not chicken wire. I think it's called rabbit wire, rabbit fencing. I don't know. It's something you can make rabbit cages out of and things like that. And I've had it in my stash for a while. I've made other things with it, and I am going to be trying to lay it out flat here. I put on protective gloves. You can see me kind of counting the number of squares here because I want to make sure that I am measuring this out right to make a box, right? So essentially I counted half the number of squares that it was tall. I think it was about 30 squares tall if you look at it from bottom to top there. And I counted out about half that many for each of my 4 sides of my soon to be box. Hopefully that makes sense. And I am going to be leaving the bottom part of the box open. So I am counting in about those 15 squares again. I am bending it over somewhat so that I get it to be able to go to a right angle. And then I'm going to do that all the way around until it turns into kind of a rectangle shape. So I'm going to be forming this. When you work with this stuff, you do want to make sure you wear protective gloves because it is very pokey. So you don't want to injure yourself. I kept getting it caught on my sweater sleeves here, but just be careful when you're working with stuff like this. And then I am going to be using my, I think those are, I'm trying to remember what they're called. They're a special kind of shear that can cut thin metal. So anyway, I am going to continue to form this, and I cut one part of it down to kind of create a flap. This is a little harder to explain than I thought it might be, but hopefully you'll be understanding based on what you're seeing me do. So I'm bending that in. That's going to be the top of my box, and I'm going to cut off the rest of the excess. So that is why I had done half of the number of squares for each of the sides, because I knew I was going to be putting a lid on it essentially, and then cutting the excess off. So now I'm going to be putting it together. I'm just kind of working the ends in to each other and using my needle nose pliers to wrap the wires around the other part of the frame. So gonna go ahead and do the same thing with the lid. I'm gonna kind of press it down. I kind of bent each of those little ends so that it would make it easier for me to tuck them into the other little squares where it was coming together. I don't know how else to describe this, so hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying. Now that edge was a finished edge, but I needed those little ends to be loose so that I could poke those through on the other side of the lid, so to speak. And now this is the bottom, and I'm just bending all of the little pokies in so that they don't poke me. So now I've picked out a couple of types of ribbon. How cute are those gnomes? These are a couple of Kirkland brand ribbons that I picked up from my local Costco. Love their ribbon. And I am just going to trim off a piece that'll go from the top, middle, and then wrap around down underneath. Now you could, if you have a ribbon that doesn't have a specific pattern to it, you could wrap it from one part of the bottom all the way up and around. But the reason I chose to do it this way is because I want all my gnomes to be right side up. I don't want any of my little guys to be upside down on sides of the package. I'm basically making this look like a gift. So going to be adding some hot glue to each of the ends here. As you can see, make sure you use your little protective finger protectors, because the hot glue clearly is hot. I did burn myself a little bit before I grabbed that first finger protector. So just be careful, you know, and you'll be good to go. So I've got it on all 4 sides, and now I'm going to create a bow. So I'm creating a loop and trying to figure out how large it needs to be based on the size of my little box here. And I started trying to figure out how I wanted to create the bow. I was kind of offsetting the loops to see if I could create a bow with multiple loops. But ultimately, I decided I was going to do each layer, so to speak, separately. And so I created that loop, and now I'm going to be also finishing it off with the complementing or contrasting, however you want to say it, ribbon. So I'm going to be making 4 of these loops. I do put a little dab of hot glue at the to connect them, just because I find it easier to work with once they're totally kind of sealed there. I didn't use a lot of hot glue, just a tiny little dot to get it to stay together. And you can see these tails that I've cut are a little bit longer than the loop itself. Ultimately, I did make them about the same length as those that were used for the loops. And that seemed to work out well as far as the look that I was going for. But as you can see, I'm using this to tie off my loops to make my bow. So the tails are actually a little bit different than the bow itself, and I'm going to layer these on top of each other. Here I'm using my hot glue, and I am just going to keep alternating the loops until I have all 8 loops kind of offset from one another. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I've got the fun little tails sticking out just to give it a little bit more interest. I had seen these in a little shop in North Carolina when I went to go and visit my son recently, and I thought they were so adorable, and I had to recreate them. So here it is with the bow all made, and I am just making sure that this is the way I want it. I'm going to go ahead and dovetail each of those little ends with the buffalo check. And once I have that done, I'll then go ahead and glue down my bow. So I'm just making sure that it's looking centered. I'm going to use a generous amount of hot glue right there in the center, and then press my bow down. And again, just make sure that I've got it centered all around on all edges. I am loving this project, you guys. All right, so now I've got from the Dollar Tree, this is a little string of lights. It's 20 little lights. And I'm going to go ahead and tuck them up inside. This is why I've left the base open, and you can see that's the twist tie that came around the lights, and I'm going to use that. I just cut it in 2, and I'm going to be tucking that through the light strand, and then also up through the inside of the mesh of the box to attach it inside of there. So I'm going to show you right here. You can see where I've got it connected. It's kind of on the other side of the ribbon, so you can't even see it. And then I was like, Corie, you silly, you should have threaded it through the mesh, because now I've got the cord that, you know, yeah. So I went ahead and I undid it. So now that I know what I'm doing and how I want it to work, I went ahead and I threaded all of the lights through the base of the box, and I had left the twist ties inside there, so I was able to just go ahead and tuck them back in and twist tie them down, and then I was all set in that regard. Now you can leave it just like that. Oh, and there they are with the lights all lit up. Super cute. Now you can leave it like that, but I decided I was going to embellish it a little bit more. I grabbed a couple of picks from the Dollar Tree that I have in my stash, and I'm going to cut these all apart and use some of the pieces here to embellish around the top of the bow. So, or around the top of the gift, under the bow and around the bow. So I had pushed all of the little leaves to the top near the pine cones or whatever else you want to call those little pieces, and then trimmed it off. And so I'm tucking it all in, and once I have everything the way I like it, because if you've followed me for any length of time, you know I'm visual and I don't like to commit until I like the way it looks. Now you can see me hot gluing everything into place, and now we're all done. Let me know what you think of this one. DIY number 4. All right, I have from the Dollar Tree, well, the paint isn't, but the glass little globe, and then this school glue, and then I've got my Lost Lagoon paint. So I just squeezed off a bunch of the glue into the bowl, container, whatever you want to call this. I don't know if this is a vase. It reminds me of a fish bowl. And I'm just using a paintbrush to mix the paint into it. I wanted it to be relatively sheer. I honestly probably put in a little too much of the paint. I have too much of the glue also, but I'm going to show you what I do to get rid of the excess here. Once I have all of the sides of my fishbowl covered, I just kind of scooped out the excess and wiped it off on my parchment paper. And then now I am taking my jute cord. This is something I had picked up from Walmart, and I am finding a length that will work around the top of the bowl, but then also leaving tails, if you will. And my tails are probably about 12 to 14 inches long. So they're about, I would say, 3 times the height of the bowl, if that helps. And now I am just going to be cutting off additional lengths that are the same length when folded in half as the tails. Hopefully I'm making sense here. You'll see in a second why I'm doing that. But I believe I cut off an additional 6 strands there. And now I'm going to tie them by looping them through the larger loop. So I'm just going to let you see what I'm doing here. So I'm folding them in half and I'm looping them around. So folding it in half, getting it in there, tying it through the main loop. All right, so all these strands are hanging off, and I've got a total of 7 of them, I believe. So now I'm going to start taking these strands that are next to each other from separate knots, and I'm going to knot those together. Very, very simple. And I'm going to do that all the way around, taking the 2 that are next to each other from separate knots and knotting them together. And I'm just going to keep kind of pressing it down. I could probably have taped the top loop to the top of the vessel. That might have saved me a little bit of a headache, I suppose, and then it wouldn't have been moving around on me. So now that I'm watching this, that would have been a good idea. So feel free to tape down that top round if it will help you just kind of keep things in place. But you're going to work your way all the way down. Just keep doing exactly the same thing. So once you get all the way around the first row, you're going to drop down to the next row and tie the strands together again, the ones that are next to each other from opposite knots. And then once I got to the bottom, I went ahead and I pulled everything into the center. You can see just there, I've got that scrap piece there. I decided it was too short for what I wanted to do, so I cut off a longer piece, and I'm going to thread it through each of these little triangle diamonds. There you go, they're diamonds. Threading it through each of those at the bottom, and then I'm going to be pulling it tight and just getting everything gathered there. I don't know if this is the way that you're supposed to do this. It's the way that I chose to do it. If you know a better way to do this and to finish this off, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what that is, and I might attempt it again and show everyone what the right way is. But for me, I opted to do it this way, and then I just trimmed off all of the extra. Now it will not sit flat because it's got that little thing, but I kind of like it kind of at an angle. But let me know what you think of this piece. I think it's so fun. DIY number 5. For this project, I had these leftover skewer pieces from a mirror project that I had done recently. It was a starburst mirror, and these were just some scraps that I had left over. So I'm cutting a couple of these down to size. I want to make sure that they are the same length, and then I'm going to cut down a bunch of other smaller pieces, again wanting to make sure that those are all the same size. I believe I cut 5 of these for my little rungs. And once I had these all cut, I was going to go ahead and start placing them in between my 2 little uprights. And I'm just checking to make sure that everything is the same length here and trimming things off as necessary. These are my little dog toenail clippers. One of my subscribers had suggested that, and they actually work really well with the skewers and little wooden dowels. So now I am going to go ahead and place my little rungs for the ladder that we are building. Going to just do a little mini ladder. And then I'm going to use my Gorilla wood glue again for this project. Now, I was hopeful that it would be tacky enough that it would hold everything together and I wouldn't have to worry about using hot glue. Unfortunately, every time I tried to let go of the little uprights, they would like move or roll away slightly. It wasn't sufficient. So I did end up using a little bit of hot glue to tack the corners there. I did that at the bottom and then I did it again at the top. So I used my wood glue and then I came in with some hot glue just to hold it. I did end up removing the hot glue later. Just used my heat gun to heat it up once the wood glue was dry, and then I was able to just peel the hot glue away so you didn't see that little blob of glue because the wood glue will dry clear. So I just went ahead and added in my other dowels. Once I had the top and bottoms dowels secured or rungs secured with the hot glue, I didn't need to worry about the middle because my uprights weren't going to be going anywhere. Hopefully that makes sense. But I did go ahead and just add in a little extra glue because my cuts weren't perfect and I wanted to make sure everything was secure. So now I had this pick from Amazon. It's a boxwood pick, but then that little metal circle, that was a part of a Dollar Tree paper towel holder that I had taken apart. And so that was a leftover little ring. And I am using my hot glue, putting a pretty good size little blob on the metal and then attaching my little greenery stems. And I just continue to do that, working my way all the way around, lifting it up where I needed to get down underneath and just making sure that my little wreath was nice and full. And then I took some Dollar Tree ribbon and I am creating a loop and trying to figure out how I'm going to attach this because this is going to be going on our little ladder. So I went ahead, cut that off. I was trying to figure out how I wanted to attach this to the ladder. So this is my thinking mode right now and think. And then I finally went ahead and tied a knot in the top of this. And then I trimmed off that little excess once I had that knot nice and tight. Flipped that over just to make sure that I had a nice clean edge. Used some hot glue on that to seal that in like that. And then I went ahead and I grabbed some more ribbon and created a little bow loop, like a loop bow. So I kind of tucked the ends under. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any frayed edges sticking out. So this is kind of a weird way of doing it, but hopefully you can tell how I was creating that seam. You could also just lay it flat, glue it together, and then flip it right side out, and then you would have the same kind of seam, if you will. But then I took another little piece of ribbon and I am going to wrap this around the middle of my bow. I'm obviously using hot glue for this as well. Just wrapping that around so that I create a little faux bow, and then I'll trim that off as well. And I'm going to tuck the end in underneath because again, you know, I like to have my clean edges, and just use a little bit of glue on there. Once that was all set, I fluffed up my little loops for my bow because I wanted them to be a little fluffy, not just flat. And I attached that to the little knot that I had created at the top, or at the end, excuse me, of my loop. Once I had that all set, I then grabbed my little ladder once it was completely dry. I did let it dry overnight. And then I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to attach this to the ladder. So I undid the little loopy thing and I ended up tucking it in and attaching it in that regard, just kind of looping it through. And here it is all done. Let me know what you think. DIY number 6. I have a Dollar Tree canvas and a little light set from the Dollar Tree as well. I am excited about this one, you guys. I started out with my Cricut. I went into the design space and I was just looking for merry and bright. I was looking for something that was already created for cutting specifically, so I filtered it there and I found a bunch of different designs of merry and bright. I selected a few, dropped them onto my little canvas, and then I decided which one I was going to use. So here you can see I'm just kind of spreading them out on the canvas, trying to just take a look at them all together here. And I finally settled on that top left one. So I'm just deleting off the others and I'm going to work with this one. The neat thing about this particular image is that it is grouped, and I discovered this by accident, that I was going to be able to ungroup it, and that was going to allow me to manipulate it, not only move the words around a little bit, but I was able to delete out those other little pieces that I didn't need or want for this particular project. So once I had it all done the way I wanted, I went ahead and cut it out on my Cricut. You can see I am just using a scrap piece of vinyl. If you guys have followed me for a while and you've seen me working with vinyl, I tend to trim off all the extra parts of my vinyl and I put them away for another time. So here was an opportunity to use one of my little scraps. And I went ahead and weeded it all out. I'm leaving the words in this instance. And so then once I had it all weeded, I got it onto my transfer tape. This is a piece of transfer tape that has been used many a time. And I was actually worried that it wasn't going to adhere to the vinyl, but it did very nicely. So then I went ahead and I set it down on my canvas. Now, I always struggle a little bit with getting vinyl to stick to canvases, especially if I haven't painted them first. So I knew that it was probably going to be a little bit of work to get this off. Fortunately, because this transfer tape has been used so many times and it definitely has quite a bit of fuzz on it, I didn't have too hard a time. So I'm just working slowly, making sure that all of my little ends are staying down and working my way across the canvas, just making sure that everything is settled down. And this is sped up about 2.5 times just to give you an idea. So once I had worked my way down to the other side, I just want to make sure that everything is on there nice and solid. So I flipped it over because this gives me more pressure, right? With the canvas, there's a lot of give. So this is my moss chalk paint. You can use whatever color you want, whatever makes you happy, but I'm literally painting over the entire thing. And once it's dry, I'm going to be peeling up all of those letters and revealing the words. So they are now going to be kind of knocked out in white. Now, I did have a little bit of bleeding here. What I probably should have done is paint over it in white first and then paint over it in green, because that would have kind of sealed in my letters, and then any bleeding would have been in white and you wouldn't have been able to see it. Didn't occur to me at the time, even though I do that regularly, but at any rate, that's a good way to avoid the bleeding. So now you can see I've got my little light set that I've taken out from the Dollar Tree. I started unraveling that, but then the bleeding was bothering me a little bit, so I did decide to go in and touch it up here and there. I didn't go crazy with touching it up. I decided that from a little bit of a distance you couldn't see it anyway, so I left well enough alone. And now I am coming in with my weeding tool. You just need some sort of a sharp object, just something that will pierce the canvas. And I am putting 10 strategic holes in here. I'm placing the holes where I want my lights to poke through, because we're going to be using our lights coming through the back side of this. And now I'm just using a mechanical pencil to widen those holes a little bit more so that I'll be able to fit my little lights through without any trouble from the back. So now I'm going to grab my lights. I'm going to poke them through each of those little holes that I've created. And once I have those all set, I am going to come in with some hot glue. In just a second, you'll see. So I finally stopped flipping it back and forth because my little lights kept falling out on me. So I've just got it upside down. I'm poking all my lights through. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to come in with, see, I got to stop flipping it over. So I came in with my hot glue just to make sure everything was secure and it wasn't going to pull out on me. So you just want to be careful with that hot glue gun though. Don't get that metal part too close to the wires or you could potentially melt it. So I was just kind of drizzling the hot glue down on that. And now this is a piece of canvas that I had removed from a frame on a completely different video, completely different project. And I had it just sitting in my stash waiting to be used for another project. So here we are. And I am just going to fold over the edges to create clean edges. And we're going to use this to seal up the back of our project here. But now I'm only going to be putting the hot glue across the top piece of this, because these lights are battery operated and I want to be able to replace the batteries as needed. So this is Velcro. This is from the Dollar Tree. They're little Velcro dots. So I'm going to pull some of these out of here. And I suppose I could have done Velcro on the entire thing. I don't know why I decided to hot glue the top. So you could do it however you would like. But I, for whatever reason, I think originally I was thinking about hot gluing maybe half of it. And then ultimately I decided no, that I really wanted to be able to get in there a little bit more. So I wanted flexibility, let's say. So I ended up Velcroing 3 sides. You totally could Velcro all 4, whatever is going to make things easiest for you. So once I had those all set, I knew I was going to be good to go. I'm seeing if I can get it to stand up here. It didn't want to cooperate. So I'm going to use a tongue depressor stick on the back side of it. I just used some hot glue along the edge of the tongue depressor stick and I lined it up with the bottom edge of the frame. And this will just give it a little bit more of a platform, so to speak, to stand upright. So now I have my little screwdriver set from the Dollar Tree and my batteries that I'm going to put in here. These little light packs, they have a teeny tiny little screw. So this little screwdriver set that I got from the Dollar Tree has been awesome for this because they're just tiny little screws. And so anytime you have, or screwdrivers, so whenever you have tiny little screws, this little kit comes in handy. And so I'm able to tuck my little battery pack in there, seal it up with my Velcro, and this is done. DIY number 7. All right, this is a trash to treasure somewhat. That box used to have wine in it a long, long time ago. It's been in my stash for years and years, and I'm finally excited to be doing something with it. I also showed you I've got some more fairy lights that I've set to the side, and I have 3 Dollar Tree vases. I've got my antique wax by Waverly here that I've pulled out along with a baby wipe, and I'm going to go ahead and apply this all over my little wood box. And I love the way that the grain comes out on this. I think it's so super pretty. And a little bit of this wax goes a long way. So just getting a little bit on my baby wipe. I'm really just using what's on the lid of the antique wax container. And once it's all done, I set it aside to dry, and I'm going to work on getting this cleaned up. So I've got my rubbing alcohol, and these have just been sitting in my stash for a while, so I wanted to make sure that they were nice and clean. I'm going to be dropping them into my box. And now I've got all of this extra greenery that I've been saving. So when I pull my picks apart, I also had that moss. I ended up not using it. I thought I was going to use it at first, but I didn't, so you can disregard that. But whenever I pull my picks apart, I tend to end up with a lot of extra greenery, and I save it. and now I'm going to be using a whole bunch of it. And I am using this to not only make it pretty, but it's also serving to secure my vases in place without glue so that they don't clank together. Now I've got these blue and white hydrangeas that I think are absolutely beautiful, and I'm just going to cut them all apart. And I started to put it in a little bundle. I thought I was going to use wire, and I was like, no, that's not going to work. So I went to my stash, grabbed these little styrofoam balls, and I'm going to stick these all into the balls, but realized that I had too much of a stem on there since I'm not going to be bundling them, and I'm going to be using the styrofoam instead. So I cut these down. I had maybe about a half an inch left of my little stems. Tucking these in all over the top half of the little ball, and I'm alternating colors with the blue and white and just getting it to a place that looks pretty to me, and I can drop it right on top of my vase, and these are like little floating flower balls. I think this is so fun. So now I am going to go ahead and attach my, well, I'm going to unravel my fairy lights, tuck them down inside the vase here, and then I'm going to be securing it to the bottom of the styrofoam ball. Now I decided that the lights were sitting a little too low, so I'm going to fill the bottom with some more greenery. And then I'll go ahead and tuck my lights back in. Now, if I had to do this over again, I would have cut my styrofoam balls in half and made sure that the bottom part was the flat part so that I could more easily adhere my little battery packs to the styrofoam balls. It would have been a little bit easier. It all worked out, but again, if I had to do it again, that's what I would have done. So I'm just going to go through and do the same thing with the other two, getting them all set, dropping the greenery in, dropping in my fairy lights. And these are wired, and so they kind of take shape, if you will, and I'm just kind of bunching them up with no rhyme or reason. It's all very random. You'll notice I am applying the glue to the side that does not have the screws on it. That's because if ever we need to change out the batteries, we want to be able to access them. So that's why I'm doing it that way. And here is the third one, just getting that applied, and we are going to be all set. I am dropping that in, fluffing it up, and we are all done. Let me know what you think. DIY number 8. All right, I have a whole bunch of scraps of paint sticks, and then this is a wall decal, or a set of wall decals that my sweet subscriber Rose sent to me a while back, and I'm just showing you what it's supposed to look like if you put it on the wall. It kind of forms a Christmas tree shape with all these words. And I'm looking for pieces of wood that'll work with these shapes. So this is a little plank that came in a pack of, I think it was 6 from the Dollar Tree. I just pulled one of them out, and I am cutting it down to be double wide so that it's about the same width as the paint sticks that I'm going to be working with. And this is going to be a little bit wider at the top for my star shape that you can see there at the top left corner of the screen. I'm using some tape. I used some wood glue to combine those two pieces, and I just taped it so that it wouldn't slide, and then I put something heavy on it to let it dry. So now I'm taking all of my scraps from my paint sticks. These are all the larger paint sticks, so the ones that are probably, gosh, I would say 1.5 to 2 inches wide, and then I think they're maybe 18 inches long. So the big ones that you could find at your home improvement store. And I was trimming off the angled edges as well as the handle parts. And you can see they're all different lengths. And then I didn't have any that were quite large enough for some of what I needed to do. So I was going to have to trim those off, but I decided I was going to cut out all of the little pieces of my wall decal first so that I could lay it out and figure out exactly how long I needed each of my sections of paint stick to be. I am not one to do a whole lot of measuring. If you guys have followed me for any amount of time, you know I'm really bad about giving you dimensions because I do everything by sight. Not everything, but most things. And if you have seen me measure, you've probably understood why I do things by sight, because I am really good at messing up the measurements. So at any rate, I am just, right now I'm looking at the different pieces that I have that are already cut, and I'm trying to line them up with the words that they'll fit with. So this is really, there's no science to this, you guys. I'm literally doing it by sight and just using my scraps first. And then once I get through all of my scraps, I will go ahead and trim up some new pieces, or I'll cut down some scraps to make them fit a little bit better. So you can just see how I'm doing all of this here. Once I had everything trimmed up, I did use some sandpaper, just clean up the ends, make sure everything was nice and smooth. And then I gave everything a good coat of Adirondack white chalk paint. So you can see them all kind of lined up there on their sides drying. And once that was all set, I went ahead and started lining them up in size order so that I can get ready to put my decals on here. So I'm getting them all lined up. I think it was 10 rows in the end, if I'm not mistaken, including the star. It was either 9 or 10, but yeah, I'm counting real quick. It was 10 with the star included. So once I had them all lined up in size order, I went ahead and placed out my little words again, make sure everything looks as it should. And once I did that, I can go ahead and start removing the backing and applying them to my little slats. So I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, but I'm just making sure I've got everything lined up, and then I'll smooth it down. I started trying to use my little burnishing tool, but then ultimately I found, just because my surfaces weren't super smooth, it was just easier with my fingertips because I had some brush strokes and stuff like that. So I just used my fingers and just worked my way up with each little segment, and just made sure everything was nice and smoothed down. My goodness, tongue-tied tonight. I grabbed out another full-length paint stick then. I was just making sure I had an idea of how much the bottom part of that paint stick would stick out from underneath. This is going to be my trunk for my tree, right? And I decided I liked the shape of the handle, so that's the part that I'm going to use as the trunk. And I only put enough wax. This is my antique Waverly wax. I only put enough of it to be visible from the front. And then I did coat the rest of just one side, which is going to be the back side, with the wax. I didn't coat the whole thing because I want the glue that I'm going to be using to be able to adhere directly to the paint stick, as opposed to having the wax to have to deal with. So now I'm just flipping everything over. I did have some wax I noticed on my surface, so just getting that cleaned up so that I don't end up getting wax on the parts that I don't want it on. So I'm just flipping them all over in order. And I am going to go ahead and adhere them here. So now you can see where I left the natural wood color, because I am going to be using my wood glue, and I wanted to have that pure wood surface to adhere the pieces to. Hopefully that makes sense. So then I used a teeny little bit of hot glue on either side of my wood glue band, and I'm adhering my little star to start, trying to make sure that it's super straight, because as I come down, I'm using that as my starting point, obviously. And as I come down and I line things up underneath, I want to make sure that they don't look crooked, because the closer we get to the bottom and the longer the slats, the more obvious it's going to be if something isn't straight. So I did about halfway through just check it, but you can see how I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue each time, just for that immediate bond, so that it gives the wood glue enough time to cure without me having to pause what I'm doing and hold on to it, or you know what I mean. So then I did need a little bit of extra glue there at the bottom. I got that attached. I am loving this project, you guys. So once I had that all done, I did use some Mod Podge. This is the satin that I'm using, but you could use whichever version of Mod Podge you want. The reason that I decided to coat it was actually for a couple of reasons. One, this is going to seal in all of my decals, so they're not going to lift and fall off, but it's also providing a consistent sheen to the entire project, because my decals had a little bit of a shine to them. They had a little bit of a gloss, and my chalk paint was matte, right? So it was very obvious that I had a bunch of decals adhered onto the slats. So in using the Mod Podge, that's going to provide a consistent sheen, and it's going to look a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say continuous, but that's not the right word. I think you understand what I'm saying though. But I love this. I hope you love it too, but let me know what you think. And I'm going to show you it on display right here. DIY number 9. I have some dowels from the Dollar Tree, as well as these wood pallets, I'm going to call them, from Plaid. I think they're awesome. They came in a pack of 3. We're going to be using 2 of them. I also have this little wooden tray from Michaels, and these finials from Bed Bath & Beyond. They were on clearance for $5.99 and then 70% off that. So it was like $1.50 for those 2 finials. I've had these in my stash for a while. Really excited to finally be using them, but I am applying some wood glue to my dowels. I started to put it in the corners of the palette there, for lack of a better term, and then decided to apply them oh my goodness, to apply it directly to the dowels. I was a little tongue-tied there for a minute, but went ahead and got those situated, and while they were drying, I applied a little bit of hot glue just to make sure that they weren't going to go anywhere, because you could see that I was having a little trouble bumping them and knocking them over, so I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to go anywhere. So then I flipped that over and I prepped the other wood palette. What would you call that? I don't even know what that's really called. Is it a wood canvas? I don't know. But at any rate, you saw that I applied some more wood glue and set my dowels down in there as well. So now I'm going to take the Michaels little wood box here, and I created a template for the bottom of it, and I'm folding it in half and then in quarters, and then I'm going to fold it in like a triangle shape on the diagonal. I'm just trying to find the center of my square. So I'm going to put my little pattern down there. I've got my center. I'm going to take a nail and I'm going to knock that in through the pattern so I know exactly where my center is. Drilling a hole there because I'm going to apply my finial. So I'm just going to screw this right in. I did look to see if maybe I could just take that screw out, and it looked like there wasn't really a good way to do it. So I figured, you know what, I'll work with it. I'm going to apply some more wood glue on the underside of it just to make sure that it's nice and secure. I suppose I could have used the bolt that came with it, but that didn't occur to me until just right this moment. So I used glue, and that worked just fine. But I went ahead and then applied it to the top of my lantern. Everything was dry at this point, and except for some of that glue on the underside of this one, as you can see. But I'm just applying a little teeny tiny bit of glue along here because I don't want it to ooze out on me. So applying this to the top, and then I'm going to spray paint everything with this heirloom white, and I am already loving this. I also grabbed one of these candle holders from the Dollar Tree. I spray painted that the same color. It was originally black. put a bunch of hot glue under there to secure it, and now I have these flowers that I'd gotten in a grab box from Michael's, and that Amazon ribbon, I'm going to call it, leaf ribbon. It's like a ribbon, but it's in the shape of leaves, and I think it's so pretty. But I'm going to pull apart all my picks, I'm going to cut all the ends off, and I'm going to arrange these around the base of my lantern. Now, while I am doing that, I'm going to tell you why I was so inspired for these projects. I was asked to create some centerpieces or tablescapes for the Lambertville Area Education Foundation. For those of you who've been following me for a while, you know I live in Lambertville, New Jersey, and the Area Education Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that helps support our local school system, they asked me to create something for a fundraising event that they're going to be having. It's their biggest event, I believe, of the year. It's something that they do annually, and they have a live auction and they have a silent auction, and they asked me to create this. So I decided I was going to create 4 different tablescapes or centerpieces, and I would love for you to vote and tell me which one of these I should donate to the Lambertville Area Education Foundation, or we refer to it as the LAEF. So it's a little bit easier to say. So as you watch, please keep in mind that one of these will get donated, and I would really love your thoughts on which one it should be. And the one with the most votes is going to get donated. So please, please let me know your thoughts on that. But I am loving this. Once I had all those flowers set around the base, I'm coming in with the ribbon. I'm going to call it ribbon because it's like a fabric. It's like a ribbon. It is not wired. It is just flat, I guess you would call it. But at any rate, I wrapped it around my little post, and I'm sorry it's hard to see from this angle. I need to work with my camera angles again. But I used a little bit of hot glue at the top underneath the little top to secure it, and then I wrapped it, and then I secured it at the bottom. Let me know what you think. DIY number 10. So I'm starting out with this heart from the Dollar Tree, and it's kind of cute by itself, but I'm popping off that little metal love, and I'm going to set that aside. I'll keep that for a future project. Taking off the little hang tag, and I'm going to be using the back side of it. I'm going to give it a couple of good coats of my Adirondack white chalk paint. That's by Home Decor. And once that is nice and dry, I'm going to come in with my painter's tape, and I'm lining up my stripes on an angle. So I'm going to put that down. I'm going to use another piece of tape as my spacer. I'm sure you all have seen this done before, but just going to go ahead and keep doing that until I work my way across the entire heart with my little stripes. Now I'm going to come in, this is with Elephant chalk paint. This is also by Home Decor, I think. I use Waverly and I use Home Decor, and I always get confused as to which one is which. Actually, this one might be Waverly, but it's Elephant. They're both plaid products, which is why I also get confused. But I'm just painting away from the edge of the tape because I want to try to do my best not to have any bleeding. So just making sure that is all nice and filled in. And then once that was completely dry, I'm going to come in the opposite way. I'm using my little square right there to make sure that my lines are square with my tape, because I want to make sure that I don't end up with diamond shapes. I want actual squares. So I'm just making sure that my tape is getting done perpendicular, and then I went through and I did the same thing that I did before, but just in the opposite direction. And so in those spaces that are not covered with tape, I'm going to come in with my black chalk paint. This one is Home Decor black chalk paint, and I'm just going to fill in each of those squares. And again, as I do this, I am using my paintbrush to brush away from the edge of the tape in towards the center. And it's just because I'm trying not to force paint underneath that tape. So once that was all dry, I went ahead and I peeled away all of the tape to reveal my little stripes. And I find this very satisfying when I pull the tape away and reveal those crisp edges. So I figured I normally fast forward through painting and stuff, but I thought I might share the little reveal here with you for the crisp lines. So once I have all of my tape off, I am going to be coming back in and painting my last checks, if you will. You certainly can come back in once everything is dry and apply tape back over the checks that you've already created. I opted not to do that. I decided I was just going to do my best to do it by hand, just in case I didn't get something lined up properly. I did have a little bit of the paint that got pulled off with the tape. That was the other reason. I was afraid I might damage it. So I'm just touching up the areas that had come up. It was just a little bit here and there. But now I'm going to come in with basically a flat, small paintbrush, and it's fairly firm so that it's going to give me that control for drawing the straight lines along those edges. So I'm just creating my buffalo check. I'm taking my time, making sure that I'm butting up against my black squares and just creating those straight lines that go down from one to the next. And I did that all over the heart. Now there was one edge, I don't know if you see it up towards the top, where I forgot where my line was supposed to be and I started painting more of it. So I'm just going back in with my white and I am touching that up. That's the great thing about paint. If you make a boo-boo, you can just go back and paint right over it. So I've got my buffalo checks. I am loving this already. And then once it was completely dry, I came in with some lamb's ear. This is also from Amazon. If you saw, I did a recent haul for all the stuff that I got off of Amazon, and then those little roses were actually in a Michael's grab box haul from I think it was like last spring. I forget when I did it, but no, fall, I think. It was in the fall. So, but it had spring products in it. So I'm using these items and I'm just going to create I don't even know what you'd call this down at the bottom of the base of the heart, but I'm going to clip off all of the little buds off of my roses, and these were absolutely gorgeous. I was so excited to find these in that box. I did not secure any of those rosebuds down yet. I'm still trying to figure out how I want them. But now I have these, I call these pip berries. I don't know if that's what they really are, but it's basically a little garland, a berry garland that I had left over from the holidays, but I have it in red and also in like a pearlized white. It's almost silvery, but really, really pretty. And I'm just cutting it down into sections of 2 groupings of berries, and I'm tucking that in around the wreath. I had seen something online that inspired me to do this, and I can't remember where I saw it. It was a larger wreath, and it had all of these berry twigs, I guess you can say, coming out around the wreath form in both red and then white. And so mine's a little bit different than what I saw, but I just thought it was sweet and cute and it made my heart happy. So literally and figuratively. So once I had that all done, I'm just trying to figure out where I want to position that on my little wreath sign or heart sign. So I'm getting everything arranged, trying to figure out how I want to place these roses on, and I decided I was going to start tucking them into the lamb's ear, and I just thought that that was so sweet. It's so delicate looking, and I am loving this. So I went ahead and I hot glued everything down into place, just making sure that everything is where I want it. And the lamb's ear does have wire in it, so it does help you to kind of form it into the shape you want. But then just to keep it where I needed it, I went ahead and those top leaves, I did go ahead and adhere them to the backing. And then figured out where I wanted that other little heart. This was from that package from Amazon as well. It was one of the smaller little wreath forms that came in that package of 4. And I secured it to my backing. And now I'm taking one last piece of the berry garland, and I'm going to make my hanger with this. So I trimmed off the ends so I could poke it through the little holes that I did not fill in. Those were the original holes from this sign. And then I'm bending it up and twisting it around itself. I decided that was a little too long, so I ended up taking that off and I cut it down. I thought I was cutting it to the right size, and then it was too short. Once I tried to put it back in there, I'm like, oh, now it's too short. So I was like, now what am I gonna do? Because this was all of the garland that I had left. So I'm trying to twist it back together and hoping that it's going to look all right, and it just didn't. So I detached it there, and I figured, you know what, I'm gonna just double it up, but a little bit off not completely from end to end. So I did it a little bit off. I don't know, it worked. Let me know what you think. DIY number 11. All right, this is a frame that my subscriber Rose had sent me. I had no idea what it was at first, and then she shared that she likes to put fabric around it to make Christmas trees. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to treat it like a wreath form, and I'm going to make a Christmas tree out of it. So these are from the Dollar Tree. They are basically like, I don't know, they're wired little green, evergreen stuff. I'm sure you guys have seen these before, but I'm using them as pipe cleaners or as chenille stems, right? And I'm going to be putting one at each intersection of this, what I'm going to call a wreath form, okay? And then you can see on my right there, I have some deco mesh from the Dollar Tree. And then on the left, you see I've got some ribbon from Kirkland's. So these are the items that I'm going to be using to decorate and create this little Christmas tree. So once I have all of those, I'm going to call them green stems affixed, I am now ready to go with the deco mesh. So I'm going to use both of these colors together at once. I'm going to grab them and I'm going to inspect the ends of them and just trim up the ends and make sure that they are nice and even and ready to go. So you can see me kind of cutting that off, because sometimes they're a little bit messy when they come out of the package. So I just want to make sure that I started clean with them. I'm gathering them up in my hand, and you're going to see here in a second, popping them into the top, and I'm just going to twist and twist. See there? So it's holding on to my deco mesh. And I'm going to make kind of a little bit of a bubbly, goodness, I'm tongue-tied, bubble, and bring it down into the next greenery stem thing. I'm having a really hard time coming up with words for these things tonight, you guys, as I record this, so bear with me. But I'm just going to work my way from the top of the tree all the way down around the tree from top to bottom. So I'm just hitting each of the stems, greenery stems, as I go, popping it in there, twisting it a couple of good times, right? So it's going to be nice and secure, and then just continuing all the way down around to the base of the tree. So I have done a lot of wreaths with deco mesh in the past. I was on a big wreath kick for a while there. So this is pretty much the same method that I use, but normally with chenille stems. I guess if you use a working wreath, they have stems that are kind of like this. So same idea, if you've seen any of that done. And we're just building a Christmas tree with it instead this time. So once I've gotten myself worked all the way down to the base, I'm just making sure that everything is flat on the bottom and it's going to stand up for me properly. I don't have anything at the base that got stuck there, and got all that sorted out. So now I have my 2 ribbons that I had selected, and I decided I was going to grab a third one. These are all from Kirkland. If you've followed me for a while, you know I love the Kirkland ribbon. If you're not familiar with it, it's Costco's brand. And from what I understand, other wholesale clubs have similar types of ribbon, but I find it to be the best deal. So this is a little square, not square, it's a rectangle of cardboard that I had cut out a while back, and this is what I use to create my lengths of ribbon. So this is 6 inches tall, my cardboard piece, so it's going to be creating 12-inch lengths of ribbon. So I'm going to wrap it around and around until I get to a point where it's probably thick as it needs to be for me to be able to still cut through it, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut through the top. Once I have that, I'm going to fold the ends in half and I'm going to dovetail them. I just like to do it all together at once because I find that it saves me time rather than trying to do them individually. So get all those dovetailed and I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to actually count them because then I'm going to do the same number of the other 2 ribbons. So did the exact same thing, wrapped it around my little card and then cut them and dovetailed them. So now I'm going to take one of each color and I'm going to randomly put them together at an angle, so angled off of each other, pinched it in the middle as you saw, and I'm going to tuck these into my greenery stems now and twist those off. Now I'm going to do that again randomly, mixing the ribbons as far as what's on top, just to make it look a little bit more interesting and not super uniform. And I'm going to work this all over the tree. So the same way we did with the deco mesh, you can see we've worked it all over the tree here. And usually with wreaths, so when I do that, I'll then twist the ends in and tuck them in. When I say the ends, I mean the greenery stems. But in this instance, I didn't because it helps it look like a little Christmas tree. I was just trying to show you at the top there, I did a double set of the ribbons at the top just to kind of finish that off. And then I've got this Dollar Tree little, you could call it a star or snowflake, and I'm going to use that for my little topper. And I'm just kind of tucking the greenery stems up into the star. But let me know what you think of this. DIY number 12. All right, I pulled this apart from a tray that I had created at one point, and so I think it's a cupcake holder from the Dollar Tree. I also had a Dollar Tree candle holder that I set aside, and these are 2 hanging plant baskets from the Dollar Tree. Now you can see I'm cutting out the circle on this one with my wire cutters, and I'm going to try to straighten out these wires as much as I possibly can. And I think I may have seen Wendy from White Sparrow Living do something along these lines a long time ago. I'm pretty sure it was Wendy. So thank you, Wendy, for the idea. But I'm just going to be creating a little cage with this. So I am turning over the ends of the wire with my needle nose pliers. Now, knowing what I know now, I probably could have used a better tool, and actually Rich is going to step in just a minute and help me out with a better tool for this. But I'm basically trying to connect these, and I've got to bend that wire around the other basket. You can see me trying to do it unsuccessfully there. And here's Rich to the rescue, and he's got his heavy duty pliers where he's just coming in and crimping all of those little hooks onto the other basket for me. So I'm sorry we're a little off frame here, but hopefully you get the idea of what we were trying to do. So once we had it all put together, thank you, Rich, I love you, I went ahead and started piecing the rest of it together. A lot of hot glue on the candle holder here, and then I did use some E6000 for that long-term bond. I'm going to flip that over into the middle of the cake tray, and I'm using this cake tray upside down, you'll see, but that's the way that I wanted it for this project. Went ahead and cleaned that up and flipped it over. And you can see my little cage is going to sit right on top of there. I super glued that, but I'm going to paint the whole thing with my black spray paint. Here it is. You can see that the surface isn't real great because of what I had done with this thing previously, but it's okay because it's going to be completely covered up. So I've got my greenery. This I had picked up from Walmart a while back. I went ahead and I decided I was going to start with this instead. Now, this is leftover pieces of a little broom, a twig broom that I had, and I am just cutting it all up. And it's formed the way that it is because I had bent it and stuck it in my little drawer for a while, and it just kind of stayed in that shape. So I am going to, once I've got this all cut down, build a little nest. So I'm just kind of taking a few pieces at a time and trying to randomly layer them over each other on the ends. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but I'm hopefully, based on what you can see me doing, you get what I'm trying to say. But just building a little bird nest in the middle here. And as it started to come together, it was just making my heart happy again. So lots of hot glue in the middle here, and this was to give it a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I want it to not fall apart, and I also want it to stay in the middle of the tray. So once it was all nice and cool, I was able to put my bird on, dropped my little cage down over, and I did use a little bit of hot glue at the points where the cage met the base, and that was just in 3 little points where the hooks normally fall in line for the little plant holder. So once I had that secure, I went ahead and grabbed my greenery, and now I'm going to tuck it in through the cage and into the little nest. I'm just going to tuck it in and around for the whole circumference around the little bird, and just dropping in my greenery and getting it all situated. My bird is not glued down. I didn't want to glue him down. He is super sweet. I have had him for quite some time. I had gotten him from the Hobby Lobby, and I just love him. So then I came in with some other little picks. These are from the Hobby Lobby as well, and they are little beads with golden flowers, some more flowers from the Hobby Lobby. Again, all of these things I've had in my stash for years at this point, so I'm really happy to finally have a project to use them in. So lots of little purple flowers, and then I'm going to come back in with some yellow flowers as well in just a moment. I guess there is a little bit of yellow with the purple as well. It's not just all purple. But look at how sweet this is coming out. Our little bird is kind of tucked in amongst all of the flowers and the greenery. Happy little bird. So once I got all of these situated, we were all done. Let me know what you think. DIY number 13. Okay, for this project I have these tulips and these wreath forms that I got on Amazon. If you have interest in any of these items, they are in my Amazon store, which is linked in my description box, but I pulled out the largest of the wreath forms. These are obviously heart-shaped, and this one was a 10-inch. And then I'm taking out a bunch of the tulips. I did purchase 2 packs, and they had 20 pieces in each pack. I ended up using about a pack and a half, a little less than a pack and a half. But I am literally just wrapping these stems around the wreath form. I'm lining up the little buds where I want them, and I'm wrapping them around the wreath. Now, if I had to do this over again, I think I probably would trim off the stems. I hesitated to do it because they were honestly so pretty. I was afraid to cut them and then be unhappy with the end result. But as I started working my way around and getting closer to the top of my heart, it was getting a little bit bulky. And so, like I said, in hindsight, by the time I was getting near the end, I was thinking, oh, I really probably should have trimmed these off and maybe used wire to attach them to the wreath form. So if you decide that you would like to try something like this, that would be my recommendation. You can certainly try and do it this way, but I found that they weren't quite as secure the closer to the top I got, because again, just with the bulk and all those extra stems. But the quality of these tulips I thought was really excellent. I was really happy with them. I thought they were beautiful, and the end result was stunning in my humble opinion. So I'm hoping that you are going to like it too. But as you can see, I just continued on around, made sure that it was to the fullness that I wanted it, and just kept on going around the form. I would love to know what your favorite flower is. I'm not even sure if I know what mine is, but I love irises. I do think these tulips are beautiful, but what is your favorite flower? And I'm looking forward to spring, that is for sure. But here I'm working my way around. You can see that they're kind of, as I try to work in these additional tulips at the top there, you can see they're kind of like pulling away, and I just had to keep going back in and adjusting. So now I'm going to go ahead, and I was kind of showing where I was going to be putting a bow and trying to figure out how large my bow might be and what it might be covering up, so I knew whether I needed to add in a few more tulips. So I'm very visual, and I have to kind of picture how things are going to be as I go through here. But I did use some hot glue at the top there just to try to give it a little bit of extra security. And then I set about making my bow for the top. If you are interested in a bow tutorial, I will link that in the description box as well. I'm not going to bore you with the bow making with the step-by-step here, because I'm sure most of you have already seen me do this a lot. But I went ahead, created my bow, and I'm going to attach it to my wreath. I'm just using the centerpiece to tie it around and get it that nice and secure. I did, again, hindsight's 2020, right? I did wish that I had made the bow a little bit smaller, because I felt like I lost some of the heart shape, because you kind of lose the top of it. And so hopefully you know what I mean when I'm saying that, but I still thought it was super pretty. Trimming off my ends, just dovetailing those and getting them the way that I want them, fluffing up my bow, and that was it. And so I'm going to create a little hanger now. I basically looped another piece of ribbon and tied a knot, and then I'm going to wrap that around the top of the wreath underneath the bow, loop it through itself to secure it, and then hide that knot behind the bow. So it looks like another loop from my bow that we can use for the hanger, but it's not part of the bow, so it won't put too much strain on the bow itself. Let me know what you think. DIY number 14. All right, I have a form from the Dollar Tree. It's a football wreath form. I have some foam core that you can see I am cutting down to fit the base of that cylinder vase slash candle holder, and I am going to put this one piece right down on top of the wreath form. I'm not using this as a wreath, so you'll see in just a second what I'm doing here, but I'm just going to kind of create a flat surface there as best as I can. I'm just trying to make sure that it's going to end up being level in the end. So just adjusting as needed. And I'm going to grab my hot glue and drop a whole bunch of hot glue down into that crevice that's been created by forcing the foam down onto the wreath form. So once that's cool, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over, and I've cut the rest of my floral foam down into little pieces here, and I'm going to place them around the football form in strategic places so that I have a fair amount of coverage. And then I'll flip it back over again, and I'm going to secure it with hot glue just like I did that very first one. So now I've got a whole bunch of picks from my stash. Most of these are from Dollar Tree, but not all. And I'm securing, I'm sorry, I'm a little out of frame. I'm adding a whole bunch of hot glue to the bottom of my glass vase, and I'm going to secure that down to the floral foam. I put the glue on the vase in hopes that it would be less likely to melt my foam. So now I am coming in with some picks that I have cut down. These are like icy twigs from the Dollar Tree. I was starting to say before, most of my picks are from the Dollar Tree, but I do have some that are thrown in from Hobby Lobby that I've had in my stash for quite some time. But true to form, I am cutting everything down and just kind of sticking it in as needed. I'm starting at the base of the form and working my way up. And now I was just showing you that I've got these, they are evergreen ties. There's another word for them that is escaping me at the moment, but they're from the Dollar Tree as well. Garland ties, that's what I was looking for. And I am placing these strategically around the form as well. And I'm going to come in now with some deco mesh from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to make little bubbles with it. And they're going to be, you know, I don't really measure things, you guys. I do everything by sight, but if I had to guess, I would say these are probably 8-inch lengths. So I'm just creating little bubbles and cutting it off, and then I'm tucking that end down into the little garland ties and twisting that off to make sure that they are nice and secure. And that's all I'm doing with those. And I'm going to create one of those little bubbles at every place I have a garland tie. Now I'm going to come in with more picks. I've got a whole bunch of poinsettia picks that I'm going to use. And then I've got some other flowers. I have pine cones. I have little beads, all kinds of different things that you're going to be seeing me use as we work our way through here. And I am just going to make sure that I am kind of spreading them out and around on the form so that everything is a little bit balanced. Now I've got these champagne flowers that I'm coming in with. They are also, I don't know what kind of flower they are. They look like little mini poinsettias to me, but and then coming in with, these are from the Dollar Tree as well. These are like, I don't know, they're like gold glittery twig things. I don't really know what they're supposed to emulate, but they're pretty and they're blingy. So this is going to have a little bit of bling in it. Not a whole lot, but some glitter here and there. And then some gold with these gold berries. These berries in particular are from the Hobby Lobby, I can tell you that. I'm looking here. I think it's those berries might be the only thing that ended up in this particular arrangement, so to speak, that were from the Hobby Lobby. I think everything else that you see here was from the Dollar Tree. There might have been a couple of pine cones that I'd gotten in a grab bag or grab box from Michael's, but I'm not even confident about that. I think most everything is pretty much from the Dollar Tree. I do have some white flowers that I'm trimming down now just to help make this lush and full, because I was starting to run out of my poinsettia picks. I'm going to have to replenish my stash on those. But you know what? You can use whatever types of flowers or greenery you want for this type of a project. Hopefully you've seen by now that this is going to be a centerpiece with a candle in the middle. Once I had it all set and ready to go, I grabbed some sand. This is just a natural sand color from the Dollar Tree. I was wishing that I'd used white sand. If I had to do it over again, I would use white, but you know, this worked out just fine. I dropped in a gold candle and this was done. DIY number 15. All right, these are from the Dollar Tree. This one was a little wobbly. They are candle holders. I didn't even notice that when I purchased it, but then I have this other little candle holder from my stash that I am going to use, and it's actually fine because I want these to be two different heights, so I'm going to use that other little glass one on the wobbly one. Now this is a candle from the Dollar Tree. As you saw, you can peel those wrapper little decoration, whatever you want to call them, right off. And I'm using some rubbing alcohol and now my Dollar Tree razor blade scratchy thing to take off the glue and also the printed ink. There was like a little timestamp or some sort of quality stamp on there that came right off with that. I am now using my matte Mod Podge and I'm going to give the entire surface of the glass one coat, and I'm going to set that aside to let it dry. I've just got it sitting on some parchment paper, which it will not stick to. Then I'm going to finish cleaning up my little candle holders and adhere that one to the bottom. I'm kind of doing it upside down, and I'm thinking that's going to kind of create a really fun continuous shape there. This is my E6000. I'm using a little bit of this as well as a little bit of hot glue that you'll see me use in a minute. So I've got that instant bond with the hot glue, but then the long-term hold with the E6000. Because the hot glue really doesn't do well with glass. It will pop right off. So need a little bit of that extra hold. So I've got this all glued down, and now I'm going to wipe away any of that excess glue that might be kind of sticking out. I'm using my fingernail to get the hot glue that smushed out of there. And now I'm going to give everything a good couple of coats of white Adirondack chalk paint. And I'm using a little sponge. One of my subscribers recently shared that if you use the sponge, it helps with multiple coats of paint and not taking the paint up off of the glass project, so to speak. So now you can see I've got my little mini heat press, my easy press there. I've got some tissue paper from the Hobby Lobby that I had picked up, and I cut it down to the right length here. My Mod Podge is now dry on here, so I'm just going to be ironing this onto my glass surface. And I'm sorry if I'm a little bit of out of screen here, out of frame, but I am just measuring off the amount of tissue that I need here to meet up as close as possible at the back. And now I'm wrapping it with some parchment paper just to protect my tissue. It probably would work just fine on its own, but I just wanted to err on the side of caution. So I did put some tissue between the heat element and my tissue paper, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the other candlestick. I love this method of decoupage. I'm absolutely in love with it. So thank you to whoever suggested that I iron it onto a dried Mod Podge surface. It works like a charm. So just running my heated press all over it. And it was not making the glass super hot. I mean, it was warm to the touch right after, but I guess because there wasn't a lot of the heat element on the surface for any extended amount of time because of the curvature of the glass, it was actually super easy to handle. And I got it all nailed down there, but then I did go ahead and on the edges I added some Mod Podge. I kind of stuck it in underneath there as well, and just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to start lifting over time. I do eventually put something else over top of it, so it was kind of overkill, but I did Mod Podge right along the seam. I opted not to go over the entire surface with the Mod Podge because I didn't know if it would start making it not warp, but wrinkle, like a bulge and wrinkle. Swell. That's probably the right word. Oh, goodness. I think you know what I mean. But I pulled out some adhesive cork from my stash and I trimmed up two little circles that I could put at the bottoms of my candles. This is probably overkill, you guys, but I just decided that that's what I was going to do to finish off the bottom of my candlesticks. And that is really pretty much it. Now they're ready to go on the little candle holders that we created. These are going to look absolutely fantastic on my mantle. You can kind of see the seam at the back there, but the front looks phenomenal. I love it, but let me know what you think. DIY number 16. All right, I have these hurricane vases. They literally are called hurricane vases from the Dollar Tree. And then I have a couple of these candle holders that I'm flipping upside down and I'm going to hot glue. Now, I'm hot gluing these. If you want a permanent hold or something that is not going to fall apart even while you're making the project, I highly recommend using your E6000 or your Gorilla Glue or something like that. I'm using my hot glue because I want to be able to put this together pretty quickly. And I didn't want to have to wait for it to dry, but you're probably going to see that it does, it does not hold very well. But in the meantime, I am using these garland ties, also from the Dollar Tree. I'm just twisting it around the seam where my two glass pieces came together. And this is really just to camouflage the fact that I've got two different pieces going on here. And they are a little bit longer than what I need for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim off the ends. Now, I probably could have done it in such a way that I only had to trim one end, but anyway. Now I am taking some berries off of this berry garland. This came in a grab box from Michael's, so it was part of one of those $5 boxes, and I'm just going to pull apart the little pieces that I need, and I'm kind of curling them around, so it's making a little, I don't know, cluster of berries there. And now I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. Pulling out some ribbon from my stash. This is also from the Dollar Tree. I considered just tying it in a cute little bow and then decided that I was going to create the bow instead. So I am just measuring it off for around the top of the vase here where it gets to the skinny part. And I'm going to go ahead and just hot glue this a little bit to help me get it tight. So just a little dab of hot glue there, putting the ribbon down. Now, reminder, hot glue doesn't stick real well to glass. So if I ever want to take this off, it'll be really easy to do that, right? So just put another dab down so that that's nice and secure. And then I'm going to create a little loop bow to go over that seam. So I thought about how I was going to do this, and I finally determined, and I was limited on the amount of ribbon I had here, so I was having to be judicious with it. So trying to figure out the best way to do these bows with using the least amount of ribbon, because there was just barely enough on my little roll for making both of these. So I had just basically created a loop, and now I've got another little piece that I glued to the back of it. I'm going to flip that around, and that's going to be the little tie part, the knot part of my bow, and hot gluing that down as well, and just making sure that everything is lined up and not twisted funny. And then I'll go ahead and glue that to the front of my piece. I'm just trimming off the little tails here, cutting these at an angle. A lot of times I like to dovetail my bows, but in this instance I decided I just wanted it to be just a diagonal cut, so to speak, and that'll keep the ribbon from fraying as well. And then I did the exact same thing for the other side and just gluing that on the seam. These are so cute, you guys. I love them. So now I'm just taking some white sand that I had in my stash. I figured it would look like snow, and dropping that in. And then I had grabbed a couple of little candlesticks from my stash, my personal candle burning stash. I thought these would work, but they were a little too tall. So I opted not to do the real candles, and I went in and grabbed my little rechargeable candles. These are fantastic. I love them. The one needs to be recharged, so I went ahead and grabbed a different one and just dropping these in here, and these are done and so sweet. But let me know what you think. DIY number 17. All right, styrofoam heart. I love all of these styrofoam forms that the Dollar Tree does. I decided I was going to go ahead and sand this though, because there's a ridge all along the sides of the heart. I imagine they have two pieces of styrofoam that they somehow put together. So I gave the whole thing a nice little sanding and made it nice and smooth. It was really kind of cool because it started looking like cement after I put the chalk paint on it for doing this. Excuse me. So it had a really kind of cool look to it. That was my Adirondack white chalk paint. I decided I needed some help with this. I didn't want to just set it down, and I also needed to finish painting it, so I fashioned the foam core with those skewers, and it worked actually really well. So once it was all dry, I went ahead and grabbed one of my napkins from my stash. This, I believe, came from Bed Bath & Beyond. I'm not positive because I've had these for quite some time, but I think that's where it came from. So it's really important that you use just one layer. This was a 3-layer napkin, so I pulled away just that top layer. And now I'm going to prep my design. I am just wetting a paintbrush and using the wet paintbrush to draw an invisible line around where I want to tear it. And then you can see it just tears really, really easily that way. And then once I had that all trimmed away and cut out, I decided to see how it was going to lay on my heart, because with the curves, you just want to make sure that it's going to lay down as flat as possible. And then I made a couple of adjustments as necessary so that I could get it to form to my heart shape without too many wrinkles. Now, one thing I forgot to do was to tear along the straight edges of my napkin. You want to make sure that you do that, and I'll show you in a minute why. But in the meantime, I am putting down a really good layer of Mod Podge. This is a glossy Mod Podge. Mod Podge is also a plaid product, if you didn't know. But I'm covering the entire area that I'm going to be adhering this particular piece of napkin to, stretching it out gently so I don't tear it, and just forming it to my heart. And then I'm starting with some more Mod Podge and working my way out from the center to the edges, just laying that down, trying to help it go where I want it without the wrinkles. You see that straight edge with the flowers there? You want to make sure you tear the edges of your napkin. You don't want straight edges like that because it creates a harsh line. When you tear it, and that's why I don't cut my designs out either, when you tear it, it kind of blends in with the background and it is so much less noticeable, and you will see in just a moment what I'm talking about. I did end up tearing that other side because I noticed that there was some break in the pattern that I didn't like. So I had, you can see it there, I had torn that off. So that side worked out well, but there is that line I'm talking about. I don't like that. Now I probably could have gone in and sanded that. I just, I wasn't sure what it would do to the shape of the styrofoam, and I would probably have to repaint it. So I decided I was going to just try and go with it. Was hopeful that I'd be able to camouflage it. Didn't really work out that way, but this is the back anyway, so I figured it was going to be okay. So do as I say, not as I do. Make sure you tear all of your edges so you don't end up with harsh lines. But I'm taking another piece of the napkin and just getting this lined up and figuring out how I want it placed, tearing off the excess, trying to figure out how I need to do it to get it to form around those curves. And then I went ahead and I kind of trimmed out a wedge there, trying to get it to form around the side of that heart. So I'm laying it down. It's still kind of bunching a little bit, so I tried taking out a little bit more, but ultimately I realized that I needed to just remove that piece and lay it down separately because it just wasn't laying down flat, and that's fine. It's perfectly fine. So I separated it here, and then I'll just lay these pieces down separately. So getting that where I want it. And then I'll go ahead, I'm kind of holding it in place because I don't want to lose my spot there. But go ahead and put some Mod Podge down underneath it. I'll lay it back down over, and then I'll come back over it with the Mod Podge to seal it all in. And you can do this with all different kinds of things. I had a pumpkin that I did last year. Actually, I guess it was 2020 that I did that pumpkin, and I was amazed at how much you all liked that pumpkin. And then I had also done a bunny that was really popular. I love the styrofoam products that the Dollar Tree puts out. They have so many possibilities, and I'm already thinking about what I can do with the other foam hearts that I picked up at the Dollar Tree at the same time during a recent haul. That video is over on Come On Over with Corie. If you're interested in seeing that and everything else that I got at the Dollar Tree, I will link that in the description as well. But let me know what you think of this one. DIY number 3. Do you remember when I made this heart? Well, I made 2 more, and we are going to be using these to create something else. I thought I was going to use those styrofoam eggs and this floral moss. I ended up using other things, so I'm going to show you in just a second because I saw this sitting on the side. I had gotten it out thinking I was going to use it for a different project that you'll see a little bit later, and then I thought, you know what, this might work even better than those little eggs. So I started clipping the little skewers off of here, and I started inserting them into the tops and bottoms of my hearts. So just making sure that that hole is nice and secure, and tucking my heart, my little baby heart, on top of the other. And then I'm taking the piece that I cut off and inserting that into the top, cutting it at an angle to make it sharp. And then I'm going to add my second heart on here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with another little baby heart, and then finally our third decoupaged heart. If you did not see that video, I will make sure I link it in the description box so you can go and see exactly how I created these hearts with Dollar Tree items. So I've got this all put together, but it was a little bit flimsy, and my initial thought was to use one of these big skewers from the Dollar Tree. I've had this in my stash for a while, so I went ahead and I decided, you know, I'm going to see if I can get it to work with these little baby hearts. I was a little scared it was going to completely mangle the heart. I had extras, so I wasn't worried if I needed to start over with it, but it actually worked perfectly. So I went ahead and tried getting my skewer all the way through the center of two of the hearts, and then I only had to go halfway in through the bottom of the third heart that was going to be on the top. So I just went in from both sides and just made sure that I was coming out at the places that I wanted the skewer to be going. It was not as difficult as I thought it might be. So did the same thing with that middle heart, and then that third heart that's still there on my table to the right, I only had to go in part way. Once I had all of my holes kind of drilled, for lack of a better term, I went ahead and I stacked everything up on my skewer, got everything in where I needed it to go, and then I just slid those back up once I had it as far as it was going to go with that. Now I am grabbing a Dollar Tree flower pot that I had in my stash, and I am going to get this all fancied up a little bit. I'm taking it was a ghost at one point from my very first year doing my channel, and I had taken it apart, and I'm just using this fabric to kind of, it's not really lining it, right, because this is on the outside, but I'm wrapping the pot with the fabric to fancy it up a little bit. So I'm just using a little bit of hot glue on the inside, and it's, because that's plastic, I should be able to pull this off later if I decide that I want to use the pot for something else. But I'm just tucking the fabric in and around. I did it at the 4 north, south, east, west points, right? And then I'm kind of pleating it a little bit. I'm sorry you can't really see what I'm doing. I'm just putting a dab of hot glue in underneath the fabric after I've pleated it to just get that to hold. So this was really very simple to do. It did not take a lot of effort or a lot of time, but I thought that the effect was really nice. So I'm just doing that last final pleat, gonna tuck that in, and I'll secure that with hot glue as well. So once I had my pot all dolled up, I went ahead and I grabbed my glass beads. I have a whole stash of these things, and I was using it to weight down the planter, but also to hold my skewer. And this is so tall, you guys. I'm sorry that a lot of it is out of frame. I don't have the ability to, unless I get down on the floor, which I suppose I could have done, but I just don't have enough ceiling height to have my camera up too high, or high enough, I should say, to be able to capture all of this. So you'll get to see it in a few minutes, but I went ahead and put Excelsior around the glass beads to hide them. I would have used a little bit more, but I ran out. And then I've got these faux moss little stones. Those are all Dollar Tree supplies. And the glass stones that I had in there were mostly Dollar Tree also. Now I'm just taking a red satin ribbon and I am wrapping it around the top of my planter, and I'm tying a shoelace bow. It was a very simple thing. So there's my planter, and let me know what you think of this when I show you the final reveal pic here. DIY number 18. All right, I have a bunch of my Arteza paints. These are acrylic paints, and I'm going to be decorating some Christmas ornaments. I saw someone recently in a Facebook group that I am part of, because I recently decided I wanted to start trying to do paint pouring, and he paint poured on ornaments, and I thought that would be so fun. So now, you guys, I'm adding a little bit of hot glue to the base of my ornaments just inside, and I'm sticking it down on the parchment paper. This was the only thing I could think of off the top of my head to secure these so that when I started pouring paint on them, they wouldn't fall over and roll around. If you have a better idea, please let me know. I mean, it worked out fine in the end. I had no problem getting peeling the glue out of there, but it was a little messy. Probably not the most ideal way to do it. So if you have an idea, feel free to leave me a comment on what you would have done to just make sure that the ornaments were secure, but also available surface-wise to be painted on without having to touch them. But at any rate, I am prepping all of my paints. I had a phthalo green, I had a crimson red, a Copper Gold, it was called. I think it's actually called Gold Copper or Copper Gold. Did I say crimson? I think I said crimson. I also had a silver, my white. I think that's all of the colors, but you can see me starting to layer these. I had mixed them all with water, got them to the consistency that I wanted. And now I'm just going to layer them in another little silicone cup that I have. Now I did probably make my layers a little too deep, so to speak. I probably should have not made them quite as deep. And you'll see why in a minute. This was definitely an experiment, you guys. I've never done anything like this before, and so I wasn't really sure how it was going to work. But I just continued to layer these on so that I had everything ready to start pouring out of my cup. So here we're gonna go with the pour, and you're gonna see, at first I was like, oh, it's like red and green and silver, and where are my other pretty colors that are in there? I was trying to figure out where they were, and then they started coming out. And I had that copper, it was almost like a rose gold color, but it was called Copper Gold. And then I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to go over it. I'm trying to squeeze every little ounce out of here. One other word to the wise. You can see at this angle, from this angle, because of my camera, that I had some empty areas. Yeah, here I'm coming in with just paint. I didn't like the colors, that they were so dark. So I was like, let me put a little bit at a time. And then I was like, you know what, I need to layer up some more in my little cup again to do another pour. So that's what I ended up doing. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about the empty spaces on these orbs. You can see on the ornaments that there are some blank areas. That was not visible to me from where I was standing. Those were like the back side of the ornaments. So just keep in mind, if you do something like this, because I wasn't thinking about it until after the fact, that the paint, even though it looks like it's covering everything from your vantage point, you might want to go and look at the other side of it and see how it's looking from the other side. So here I'm pouring on some more of the paints that I've now layered up again. And you guys, bear with me. I know it looks like a hot mess. I know, at least the way that I'm looking at it right now, it all looks very orange. I was so happy with how these dried, how they turned out. They did coat more as I let them dry. I let them sit for 2 days, and so they continued to coat the ornaments. But look at this. DIY number 19. All right, I have this piece of molding that I got at Habitat for Humanity for $2. I went ahead and I cut it down with my miter saw, and I'm just cleaning up the edges, making sure everything is nice and smooth, and then I'm going to piece it together. These ended up being about 11.5 inches long each. It was just because that was how my piece of molding was able to be divided. I cut it into 4 equal pieces, essentially. And now I'm just using my Gorilla Wood Glue to glue it all together, making sure that everything is nice and lined up to create my frame. Once that was set and dry, I flipped it over and I went ahead with my staple gun and I gave it a couple of staples at each corner just for some added support. So now I'm going to pull out some of my chalk paint. Oh, before I did that, actually, I noticed that it was already a little banged up, so I decided, you know, I'm going to distress it a little bit more. In hindsight, I was kind of wishing that I had done this after I painted it, because the paint kind of didn't go into all those little holes. But I've got my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I am just using a chip brush and going over this with a very dry brush to just get it to where I wanted it. I wanted this to look distressed. I wanted it to look older. And so I just kind of went with it until it looked the way that I wanted it. After I used the Adirondack white, I actually did come back in with a second color. I'm pretty sure it was mineral that I pulled out, and you'll see that in just a second. I ended up using the same exact brush, and I did the same process. So here it is, and just went back over it, and it kind of knocked the white down a little bit, also made it look a little bit more aged. But I loved the effect. So hopefully you like it too, but let me know what you think of this. And how do you like to distress things? Do you use the chip brush like this? Do you tend to give it a painting and then go in with sandpaper? What is your favorite way to distress? So now I've got more of these. I've got another one of these little wreath forms, but then also a couple from the Dollar Tree. I ended up not using them. At first I thought I was going to do the trio, and ultimately went with just the one. And I'm looking for a ribbon. I pulled out a silver ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and then I pulled out a few pink ones. Those are all three from a pack I'd gotten from Michael's a while back. And I decided pretty quickly that I liked the pink more than the silver for this particular project. So I'm trying to decide between buffalo check or the little stitched or the polka dots, and ultimately I went with the stitched. I just thought that it looked nicest with what I was trying to accomplish. I did consider just tying the bow directly right there, but then ultimately decided that I was going to have more control if I pieced it together. So I'm creating a loop. I'll go ahead and cut that off, and then I'm going to cut a second one the same length so that I am hopeful that I'll have, you know, the same thing going on with both of those little bumps in the heart, if you will. So I'm going to loop those over, get them situated. I do like to put my ends underneath each other, like you can see what I'm doing. I kind of fold them over themselves just to make sure I've got clean edges, just in case anything ends up sticking out. And I went ahead and secured that, and then did the same thing on the other side. So just getting my loops set. They were not attached to the frame with hot glue. They're just looped around the top of that frame right now. And then I went ahead and tied a cute little shoelace bow. Tie your shoelace bow, if you want to say, and went ahead and trimmed that off. I was going to trim those tails a little bit more a little later, but I created a second bow that's the same size, and then I'm going to go ahead and secure those to the little loops there, just at the top of where they're secured to hide that seam. So I went ahead and did that on both sides, and then trimmed off all of my little tails. I just think that this is so sweet. I love the way that this looks. So once I had that done, I went ahead and flipped it over, and I decided I was going to secure that ribbon so that the little bows don't end up, you know, sliding around and going elsewhere. And now I just am taking some wire that I had in my stash, and I'm going to create a little hanger. I was able to stick it down through underneath one of those staples on the one side. On the other side, I did end up needing to put in an extra staple because I couldn't get it under there, but it worked out just fine. And I just made sure everything was nice and tight and wrapped around and not poking out. My little wires are poking in towards the wood, so it won't damage my wall, and that's it. Let me know what you think. DIY number 20. All right, I have a bunch of these little candle holders, I'm going to call them, from the Dollar Tree. I was thinking about making some fun candelabra. This piece of scrap wood that I had in my stash wasn't quite long enough for what I wanted to do. So I figured I would do something a little bit different, and I'm going to kind of arrange them as you see here with the 3 different sizes kind of going diagonal from each other. But securing them down onto my board with hot glue, just a ring inside of each of the little bases. And I'm going to then take floral foam I'm going to cut this down with my old kitchen knife that I keep in my craft stash. This is now a craft tool. And I'm going to cut the floral foam down into chunks that I can place around on the wood base around all of my little candle holders. So I'm going to secure each of these with hot glue, and I'm putting the hot glue down on the wood rather than right on the foam just to kind of help not melt the foam. I do have it on the low setting, so it's not super, super hot. And then I'm kind of piecing everything else in there. I'm just showing you a whole bunch of picks that I pulled out of my flower stash, and I am going to be using these all over. That's a garland that I got from Michael's 50% off, I think it was, a while back. But I'm going to be using all these flower picks and the pieces off of that garland to decorate at the base of what will be my table centerpiece slash candelabra. Now, this is certainly something that you could use for the holidays, but I think it's also a piece that you could use throughout the winter. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the holidays. It doesn't necessarily scream Christmas or anything like that. So it's a little bit more versatile. So I'm starting out with my greenery using my evergreen picks. I'm going to call these picks now that I've gotten them all cut off, and just trying to mirror whatever I'm doing on the one side. I'm essentially going to mirror on the other side. Now, it's not going to be exact, but it's going to be basically, it's going to be similar. Let's call it that. It's going to be similar. It will not be exactly mirrored, but I want there to be balance, right? And so however many picks I put on the one side, I'm going to put on the other side and just make sure that everything, see, it's not going to be exact. I've got one kind of berry on one side, I've got one on the other. You can see that where I am placing them, I'm using the foam that's going all over the base to my advantage, and I am sticking things in wherever they will end up being able to land where I want them, if that makes sense. So it doesn't necessarily matter where the base is as long as the pretty part is where you want it situated. Now, this is a pick that I got recently from the Hobby Lobby. It was in the fall section, but I thought it looked like little snow buds. So I am using it in my winter table centerpiece here. And I had pulled this apart, true to form. You guys know I'm always pulling my stuff apart. But the neat thing about these Hobby Lobby picks is, and I got it 90% off if I didn't already mention that, but it's a whole bunch of little picks that are wrapped together with floral paper or floral tape. So you can pull that apart and have a whole bunch of little picks to use and manipulate where you want them. Now I'm coming in with a bunch of these little white flowers. I have no idea what these are called. They look like little mini poinsettia to me, but I don't think that's what they actually are. Maybe they are. I don't know, but I am just going to continue layering in my berries and my other flowers and just doing what makes my heart happy. So that is really what crafting is all about at the end, right? This is something that we do to bring joy. So do what makes your heart happy and what brings you joy and what looks nice to your eye. So I am going to continue to layer this on until I have it all filled in. I've got these other little white flowers that I am dropping in here. And then I have these candles that I picked up from the Dollar Tree that I am just dropping in. They were emergency candles, a pack of 6, but they are perfect for this. So let me know what you think. DIY number 21. All right, I have a little foam tree form thing, a couple of socks from the Dollar Tree, and then those hearts. This is the project I thought I was going to use those for, and I ended up not using them. So the little tree form is what I'm calling this, for lack of a better term. I wanted to make sure my sock was going to fit on it, and then I've got another sock, just a plain white one, that I'm going to put around the base, so the bottom. And I'm just going to pull that down over as far as I can go with it so that it's nice and flat on the bottom. I don't want any kind of poofiness happening there because I want it to be able to rest flat on the table. So it's just going to be nice and covered, so it's got a nice fabric outside, but it'll stand up and erect. And I've got this little pouch there that we are going to stuff with some foam, not foam fill, fiber fill. There we go. So I'm just creating a little nose. If you saw the thumbnail for this video, you know that we're making a little gnome. And I'm taking some thread and I'm just wrapping it and wrapping it several times around the base of the nose, pulling it tight, and then I will tie that off. So just taking advantage of the shape of that sock. So that was basically the little heel part of the sock. So tying that off and then just kind of fluffing up the nose. So can you see it? So now I am taking out a bunch of fabric paint. This particular paint is by Arteza, but any fabric paint will do. And after the fact, I was wishing I had just used pink and white, but I ended up putting in some of the orange also, which gave me a little bit of a peachy color. For whatever reason, I had in my head that it needed to be more peachy than pink, but with the other colors that I've got going on with this, I did end up going back and putting more pink in it because I'm looking at the sock next to it. I'm like, oh, that kind of clashes. So you can see I did go back and I added some more pink. I probably, if I had to do it over again, would do it even more pink, but at any rate. Now I am taking a Dollar Tree mop head and I am going to cut off that black plastic thing. You do need something like wire cutters or tin snips. I used my tin snips. I had tried my scissors the second I started to do that. I thought it was too bulky, and then I got my scissors, went back to the tin snips, snipped that one thing, and then I was able to get all of my strands out with no problem. I took about half of those strands and I was looking at how I might put them on my little gnome, and I decided I was going to cut these all in half. So I went ahead and just individually, because I'm a little particular sometimes, you guys, and so I just wanted them all to be the exact same length. So I did them one at a time, but you can certainly fold them in half and clip them multiples at a time. So now I'm just using the hot glue to attach strand by strand along the top edge of that white sock that we've pulled up over the form, the styrofoam form. And I'm just working my way all the way around. I started at one side of the nose and I worked my way all the way around to the other side of the nose. And then just for some added strength, I went ahead and added some additional glue around the top of it. Because now I'm going to unravel all of these. And I noticed that some of the strands were not fully caught up in that first initial bit of glue that I put down. So I went ahead and added more of the glue, and then I felt like it wasn't all gonna pull out. Now I'm dividing her little hair and I am braiding her hair here. This is the first time I've done a gnome with braids, so I was really excited to give this one a shot. And I'm tying off the ends of her braids with just some really narrow ribbon. This is a part of a pack that I had picked up on clearance from Michael's a couple of years ago, I think. And snipping off those ends, I just did a regular shoelace bow, and then I did the same thing on the other side, braided it, and then went ahead and tied it off with a bow. You could certainly use a rubber band first. I just decided I didn't want to try to dig out a rubber band that would blend or not show. I think the rubber bands that I had that would have worked for that size were like blue. So I opted not to do that, but you can certainly use a rubber band first. So now I'm starting to play with her hat, and I don't know if you were able to tell, but it kind of got really skinny really fast there, and I'm like not liking the shape of it really with her hair being there. You see how it kind of, it's like fat and then it gets really skinny. So I went ahead and cut off the foot part of the sock, and I'm going to put that down first. I was planning on cutting that off anyway, so it was perfect. And now waste not, want not, right? Using that for some added fluff. So adding in the fiber fill to just fill out her little head a little bit more. And I was struggling with getting it to lay the way I wanted it, so I did pull off that little sock foot piece, and I'm gluing the fiber fill directly to the form, and then I'll put the sock back down over top of it in just a second once I have all of that the way I want it. So now her little head is going to be a better shape, and her hat will stay up and nice and fluffy. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply some glue so that that doesn't kind of slip up and off of her little head. I'm just trimming off the very edge here to make sure it's a nice even line, because I'm planning on bunching that up. So pulling this down over the other part of the sock, getting it secured down over her nose, and then I'll go ahead and glue that into place as well as soon as I have it where I want it. Although maybe I tied it off first. I guess I tied it off first. So I'm going to grab a little piece of that same ribbon that I used for her braids, and I'm just going to tie it at the top of her hat. I just thought it would be really cute. I did think about cutting slits into the very top, almost to make like a little pom-pom, but then I opted not to. I kind of liked it the way it was. And here I am going in and securing everything with the hot glue. So now I have an infinity scarf from the Dollar Tree, and it's pretty much sewn into a loop, so I had to cut it to get a flat piece of material. In hindsight, I probably could have just left it like that and used the entire thing, but I ended up using, I think it was maybe just 2/3 of it. But I'm going to tuck it under her little bod, and I'm going to figure out how long it needs to be to go around her once. And then I did about 2.5 times that length. So I went ahead and clipped off the excess and set that aside. And now I'm creating a little seam to put the scarf back together again, right? So now it's going to be a mini infinity scarf, if you will. So starting out with the same shape, or ending up with the same shape that we started out with, but just shorter. So then I folded it in on itself. Once I turned it right side out, I folded it in on itself. So it was almost like cut, not cut, but folded in half, but inward. Hopefully you get what I mean there. And so I'm gonna pull this up around her, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to attach. This is going to be her little dress or her little skirt, and I finally had the idea that I was going to open it back up again, and I'm going to get a rubber band to adhere around her middle about halfway up the fabric. So then we're going to pull the other piece down over top of the rubber band. Hopefully the image is making it clear, because I feel like I'm having a hard time verbally explaining what I was doing, but essentially that made like a little dress for her. So, and it's no sew, right? I still have to fix my sewing machine, but that'll be for another day soon, hopefully. Taking some more of that same ribbon, and just below where the rubber band is underneath the fabric, I'm going to tie a quick little bow there and just get her all fancied up, fluffed up her little dress, and then I trimmed off her little hair at the ends of her braids so it's all nice and even, and that's it. I think she's so cute, but let me know what you think. DIY number 22. All right, this is from the Dollar Tree. Actually, all of those ribbons are from the Dollar Tree, and I picked out one that I wanted to use with this little planter from the Dollar Tree. I'm gonna go ahead and take off the jute cord that they have wrapped around the top. I'm using my heat gun because that was glued on there pretty solid, but once I warmed it up, I was fine. Just be careful because obviously it's metal, conducts heat, and you can burn yourself if you're not careful. But I warmed it up just enough to be able to get that off of there. I'm going to go ahead and take out my ribbon, and I'm going to adhere this to the top of the, I want to call it a bucket. It is a planter, technically, I guess, but just using some hot glue to secure that around in a couple of different places. And then I'm also going to be doing it around the bottom of the planter as well. So just a couple of little dots of glue here and there. Again, just be careful because the metal does conduct heat, so you want to be aware of that, and be careful not to burn yourself. Tucking under the ribbon end so it has a nice clean edge, and adding a little extra glue there and pressing that down. And then, like I said, I will go ahead and do the bottom of the planter as well. So once I have that all done, I'm going to take my paint marker, and I just wanted to give this little starfish a little bit extra emphasis, or definition. So I'm just tracing the bump outs. This is, I believe they call this debossed, so it's bumped up. And I am just going over the edges of the bumped up parts of the little stars to just help them stand out a little bit more. Because I think these planters are super cute. I just feel like they could be bumped up just a tad, given a little bit more definition. So that's what I did there. And then once I have that the way that I want it with the embellishments, I'm going to be grabbing a bunch of seashells. So here we go with that. Where are my shells? There. And I've got my starfish as well. So I've got my starfish, a bunch of shells that I had in my stash. These are also from the Dollar Tree. The starfish is not. The starfish I got in a pack a while ago from, I believe it was Home Goods. But I am stuffing down a shopping bag in the bottom because I want to kind of fill up my, I'm going to call it a bucket now. I'm going to fill up my bucket so that I don't have to use as many shells. So maybe the top quarter of the bucket I am adding in my shells, covering up that plastic garbage bag, not garbage bag, shopping bag, and just placing all of my shells around my starfish. So my starfish is now able to stand on its own. I'm going to kind of twist this around a little bit so that it's facing forward with the starfish on the front of my bucket. Now this is just a piece of foam core board. You can totally do this with wood. I decided I was just going to use a piece of foam core board. I don't know why, I just decided that's what I was going to do. So I'm cutting it down to just make sure all of my edges are even. This is cut down to 3 by 7. And once I had the rectangle cut down, I'm going to go ahead and angle off the edges. So I'm using the diagonals on my cutting mat and just lining up my ruler and cutting off that corner, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the same thing with the other side, just making sure that I've got it all lined up the way that it needs to be. And I'm going to cut that off as well, so I'll have kind of a little arrow going on. So there's that. Now I'm taking my antique wax and I am going to make this look like wood. So again, if you don't have extra wood pieces, or you don't want to be cutting them into arrow shapes, or you don't have an arrow from the Dollar Tree and you want to be able to create something like this, no reason why you can't use a piece of foam core board, right? And I am going to make it look like wood. So using the antique wax, I'm kind of running my fingernails through it there, give it kind of a little bit of texture, not texture so much, but make it look like wood grain a little bit. Once that was dry, or mostly dry, I'm coming in with my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm just using a dry brush, trying to give it a little bit more character. And then I'm coming back over with my baby wipe that I used with the antique wax and just knocking that down a little bit. So I just kind of continued to blend that back and forth until I had it looking the way that I wanted it. And then once I was all happy with that, I went ahead and I grabbed out my white paint pen. And of course, you saw me air writing. I'm very visual, so I kind of do the air writing first just to make sure I know where I can put all my letters. And then I went ahead and wrote that out. Now, I went back in and I was making the letters thicker, but as I was doing this, I felt like the paint marker was picking up some of the antique wax, and the letters were not as white as I wanted them to be. They weren't as bright. Now, I think it's hard to tell on camera, at least in the little frame that I'm watching as I do my voiceover here. It looks pretty white to me on my laptop, but in person, it was just kind of muddy, and I guess you could call it a cream color, but it was like a dirty cream color, and I wasn't happy with it. And I thought, well, maybe if I go over it again, it'll brighten it up, and it just wasn't getting to where I wanted it to be. So once I had this all thickened out, I did go ahead and I grabbed out my white folk art acrylic paint, and I started trying to use this brush just to go over what I had already done. I didn't really want it to be wider than this, but ultimately I was like, you know what, this isn't working the way I'm trying to do it. I need to use the brush the way that it's created. So it was a little bit wider than I had intended, but it ultimately worked out really well, and I was happy with the brush strokes that I was getting here, and I was really pleased with it. So I'm just taking my time and going over all of my letters again, and again, you can't really tell as much here on the screen, but in person it made a big difference in the color, so I was happy. But just making sure that I don't close in my letters too much. So I want to make sure that we know that that's an A, and that I don't lose the center of my A, and then the same thing with the H. I just was trying to be real careful, but you can see with my brush strokes, I'm just going in the direction that works best for creating the letters. So not necessarily the way that you write them. Keep in mind we are drawing the letters, right? So once I had that done, I pulled out, this is a piece of dowel I had left over from another project, and I was sanding it down trying to make it sharp, and then remembered I had a pencil sharpener in my little drawer there. So I went ahead and sharpened that, and I stuck it in the bottom to make my little sign. I'm using some hot glue so that'll remain stuck in there, getting that all set, making sure it's secure. I did get some paint on the back of it, but I decided, you know what, it's just going to add to the charm. And then I'm sticking it down in my bucket with my seashells. And that's it.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know what your favorite project from 2022 was, and I am wishing you all of the very best for a happy new year and a wonderful 2023. Until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.